Okay, let's jump right in. We're doing a deep dive today into one specific chapter, Genesis 30.
And it's quite the chapter. It's got this, well, intense family drama, specifically around having children.
Right, really intense. But then it pivots, almost surprisingly, into this detailed story about uh, building wealth, livestock specifically.
Exactly. So we're going to try to unpack both sides of that, the personal struggles and the, let's say, strategic business side of things as it's presented in the text.
Let's start with the family situation then, because, wow, it centers on Rachel and Leah, the sisters married to Jacob.
Mm-hmm. And this desperate competition between them to have children for him. The text doesn't shy away from the raw emotion.
Not at all. You get Rachel, seeing she's not conceding, just filled with jealousy, actually saying to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die."
That's such a powerful line. It really tells you how high the stakes were, culturally speaking. Childbearing wasn't just personal, it was status, legacy, everything.
And Jacob's response, he's frustrated,
Yeah.
right? Like, am I God? He points out God is the one who withheld children.
Yeah, he pushes back. But Rachel's desperation, that or I'll die, it really frames the whole situation, and it leads directly to this practice of using maidservants.
Right, as surrogates. Rachel goes first, giving her maidservant Bilhah to Jacob.
And Bilhah conceives, she has a son, and Rachel names him Dan. Her words are key. God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea.
Vindication. So she sees it as, like, a legal or divine justification against Leah.
It seems that way, almost like scoring a point.
Ah,
Then Bilhah has another son, Naphtali, and Rachel's naming is even more direct about the conflict.
what'd she say?
I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won.
Wow, just lays it bare. The names themselves are battlefield reports.
Absolutely. They're public declarations in this family war, which, highlights something important about names back then. They often carried these heavy messages.
So that's Rachel's side. What about Leah? She had been having children initially, but then
But then she stops conceiving for a while. So seeing Rachel's move, Leah plays the same card.
she gives her maidservant Zilpah to Jacob.
Exactly. And Zilpah has a son, Gad. Leah names him, saying, "What good fortune." You can almost hear the relief.
Like the tide might be turning back in her favor.
Maybe. Then Zilpah has a second son, Asher, and Leah says, "How happy I am. The women will call me happy."
Ah, so she's thinking about public perception too. Social standing.
Very much so. It's about how other women will see her now. So you have this back and forth using the maidservants. Each birth is a moment of perceived victory.
And then the story takes a slightly bizarre turn. Mandrakes. What is that about?
The mandrakes. Yes, Leah's son Reuben finds some mandrakes in a field.
Which were what, believed to help with fertility or something?
Something like that, yeah. They had that reputation in some ancient traditions, so when Rachel sees them, she immediately wants them.
And asks Leah for some. Given the context, that must have landed poorly.
Oh, absolutely. Leah's response is dripping with bitterness. She snaps back, basically, "Isn't it enough you took my husband? Now you want my son's mandrakes, too."
Oof. That reveals a lot about the underlying tension over Jacob's affections, doesn't it?
It really does. It's framed as Rachel having taken him. But then they make this, this deal.
A deal involving the mandrakes.
Yeah, Rachel gets the mandrake she wants, and in exchange, Leah gets to spend the night with Jacob.
So they're literally trading access to Jacob based on these supposed fertility aids.
That's how the text presents it, and Leah is quite bold about it. When Jacob comes home, she confronts him.
What does she say?
The text says she tells him, "You must sleep with me. I have hired you with my son's mandrakes."
I have hired you. That's remarkably direct. Assertive, even.
It is, and according to the narrative, it works. God listens to Leah, she conceives again.
And has more children. Issachar first.
Yes, Issachar. She names him, saying God rewarded her for giving her maidservant earlier. Then a sixth son, Zebulun.
And with Zebulun, she hopes Jacob will finally treat her with honor, right? Because she's borne him 6 sons.
That's the hope expressed in the naming.
Man,
And then finally, a daughter, Dinah.
So Leah has this whole string of children. But what about Rachel? After all this time?
Well, after Leah's run of children, the narrative focus shifts back. And it explicitly says, then God remembered Rachel.
Remembered her.
He listened to her and opened her womb. It's presented very clearly as divine intervention answering her long struggle.
And she finally has a son.
Joseph.
Joseph. And her naming is incredibly significant. First, God has taken away my disgrace.
Disgrace, again showing that link between childlessness and social shame.
Absolutely. And she adds a hope for more. May the Lord add to me another son. So this whole section, It's just layered with desperation, strategy, cultural pressures, surrogacy, strange beliefs like the mandrakes, all centered on having children.
It's a really powerful depiction of that struggle. But then right after Joseph is born, the chapter shifts gears dramatically.
Right. Jacob decides it's time to leave Laban. He's fulfilled his service agreement, basically.
He goes to Laban and says, "Send me away, that I may go to my own home and country." He wants to take his wives and children.
But Laban doesn't want him to go.
No, and he's quite open about why. He says he's learned through divination some kind of spiritual insight that the Lord has blessed him because of Jacob.
Interesting. So Laban sees Jacob as his good luck charm, essentially.
Pretty much. He directly attributes his own prosperity to Jacob's presence. So he says, "Stay, name your wages."
He wants to keep Jacob working for him.
Right. And Jacob, before naming wages, reminds Laban just how much Laban's flocks have increased under his care. Then he makes his proposal.
And it's a very specific, kind of unusual proposal for wages, isn't it?
It really is. He says, "I'll keep tending your flocks, but my pay won't be money." Instead, he wants specific types of future offspring.
Which ones?
Any sheep or goat that's born speckled or spotted, and any lamb born dark-colored. Those will be his. Everything else remains Laban's.
Okay. And he frames it as a test of his honesty.
Yeah, he basically says, "My righteousness will answer for me later. If you find any animal with me that isn't speckled, spotted, or dark, then it's stolen." It's a clever way to propose it.
Makes it seem fair and easy to verify. So Laban agrees.
Laban agrees. "Good," he says. "Let it be as you have said, but..."
There's always a but with Laban, isn't there?
Seems like it. The text says that very same day, Laban goes through the flocks himself.
And does what? Takes all the currently speckled and spotted ones.
Exactly. He removes every single goat that was streaked or spotted, every sheep that was dark-colored. He gives them to his own sons.
Ah, so he's manipulating the starting conditions immediately.
Completely. He takes the existing animals that fit Jacob's description and puts a 3-day journey distance between them and the main flock Jacob will manage.
Leaving Jacob with only the plain, solid-colored animals, making it much harder, presumably, for Jacob to get the right kind of offspring.
That seems to be the intent. It looks like Jacob's been outsmarted right at the start. But Jacob has a plan.
This is the part with the branches, right?
He's so
That
gross.
was strange.
It does to our modern ears, yeah. The text says he takes fresh branches, poplar, almond, plane trees, and peels strips of bark off them, making white stripes.
Okay. Striped branches. Then what?
He puts these peeled branches in the watering troughs, right where the flocks come to drink, and, crucially, where they often mated when they were in heat.
So the idea is the animals see the stripes while mating, and it affects the offspring.
That seems to be the principle described in the text. It reflects an ancient belief, maybe, in prenatal influence through visual stimuli, like maternal impression, but applied to livestock.
Not exactly genetics as we know it.
Not at all. But according to the narrative, it worked.
How so?
It says the flocks mated in front of the branches and then gave birth to young that were streaked or speckled or spotted.
The exact kind Jacob was due as wages.
The very ones. And Jacob doesn't stop there. He gets even more strategic.
What else does he do?
He separates out these streaked and spotted young that belong to him. And then it says he made the rest of the flock, the plain ones, face Laban's separate flock, the ones that were streaked and dark.
Huh. Why would he do that? More visual influence.
Perhaps. The text isn't explicit on the why, just the what. And there's another layer. Selective breeding, almost. He apparently used the branches technique only when the stronger females were mating. When the weaker animals came to mate, he didn't put the branches out.
Ah, clever. So he's influencing the markings and selecting for strength.
That's what the text describes. The result. The weaker offspring, presumably plain-colored, ended up belonging to Laban's portion of the flock, while the stronger ones, bearing the desired markings, became Jacob's.
So through this combination of, let's call it, environmental influence and selective practice.
Jacob becomes exceedingly prosperous. The chapter ends this section stating he acquired huge flocks, servants, camels, donkeys. He essentially turned Laban's attempt to cheat him into a massive success for himself using this method.
It's quite a story of, well, applied knowledge, or at least what was believed to be knowledge at the time, to achieve a specific outcome.
It really is. It shows this blend of shrewd negotiation, dealing with deception, and then employing this very specific technique, whether we understand its mechanism today or not, that the text presents as effective.
So when you pull back and look at the whole chapter, Genesis 30, it's this remarkable mix.
It really is. You swing from the deepest, most painful family conflicts Jealousy, surrogacy, the fight for recognition through children straight into, well, pastoral economics and clever animal husbandry.
Intense personal drama right alongside practical business
And
strategy.
exactly. It makes you think, what does putting these two seemingly very different kinds of stories side by side tell us? What does it say about the values or the view of life presented in this text?
That life involves both these incredibly personal struggles and the very real need to, well, make a living and build security.
Perhaps. It shows how interconnected it all was. The family's future depended on children, but also on wealth and stability. Both are playing out here with high stakes.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about regarding the priorities depicted.
For sure. And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. We see Rachel's prayer for a child answered, presented as divine intervention.
Right. God remembered her.
But we also see Jacob's prosperity coming through this very hands-on, strategic, maybe even slightly unusual method with the flocks. It wasn't just passive waiting, it was active strategy.
So divine blessing on one hand, human ingenuity on the other.
Yeah. So how does the narrative seem to view the relationship between those two? Are they separate forces, or does the text suggest they can work together? That maybe blessing sometimes comes through cleverness and hard work. Something to chew on from Genesis 30.